Hello there. Welcome to Just the Dis. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian. And I've got another single disc review. Again, I don't do these that much, but I've had a few discs that have shown up post me filming my favorite discs of the year stuff. And this is another one that I would have likely included in my favorite discs had I had it on my stack when I recorded that. So anyway, this one is interesting because it is a reissue, but definitely an upgrade in my mind. And that is The Long Goodbye from Kino Lorber Studio Classics. This is the second release, as I said, a reissue from them, but they really do make it worth your while, in my opinion. I think that other version has gone out of print, so now you're only left with this one anyway, but that's not a problem. For one thing, this slipcover is awesome, and it uses my favorite artwork, the one sheet with this artwork, the Jack Davis artwork, Jack Davis of Mad Magazine. I just love his style, and I love that he did a handful of movie posters in the 60s and 70s, and what we're missing in this slipcase is the quotes. I have an insert poster of this in my office at work, and there's all kinds of little quotes from each one. Like Altman has like a little speech bubble, and Marlowe has a speech bubble, and all this stuff, and that's super fun. You obviously can't fit all that on a slipcover, but anyway, point being is I love this artwork. It's one of my favorite things, and I'm bearing the lead. This is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Just a movie I absolutely adore, from one of my favorite directors, Robert Altman. And I'll pull it out of the slipcase using another great one-sheet design for this artwork. And there's, the flip side is this again. But okay, so for those that don't know, The Long Goodbye is based on the novel by Raymond Chandler, screenplay by the great Lee Brackett, one of the great screenwriters of all time, in my opinion, and she also wrote things like Rio Bravo, which is another one of my favorite movies of all time. So she's, I think, maybe the only screenwriter that has a couple slots in my top 10, and she is truly fantastic. Anyway, so what to say about this movie? It is an unconventional detective film. It finds the Marlowe character basically a man out of time, an old style detective in modern, quote unquote, Los Angeles of 1973, drives an old car, feels like in a lot of ways an old Private Eye. And just an incredible performance from Elliot Gould. He fully embraced and made this character completely his own, and I love him for it. And I love that the movie opens with him being awakened by his cat at 3 o'clock in the morning because his cat wants a very specific brand of cat food, and Marlowe is then forced to go out to the supermarket whilst the Long Goodbye theme is playing. And that's another thing I love about this movie is the theme music, the score is composed by John Williams. Yes, that John Williams. And the theme is so beautifully used. It's used in the credits. There's actually a song version of it. But as we watch the credits, we see Marlowe, we see Terry Lennox, who will be pivotal to the plot, driving his car to the jazzy, vocal version of the theme. Then we see Marlowe in the supermarket, and suddenly the theme is there again in Muzak form. And this continues throughout the film. Marlowe walks into a bar. The piano player is, sort of noodling the theme on the piano. And by the way, that the jazzy piano theme version plays over the menu of this Blu-ray, which I thought was a really nice touch and just nice. You put it on, you've got this jazzy Long Goodbye instrumental playing, and that's great. So yeah, it's just a brilliant, sort of labyrinthine plot involving, lots of different characters. I'm not going to summarize this film. I really feel like if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But let's talk about this Blu-ray. So this has a brand new 4K master, and it looks very nice. Would I like a 4K release of this? Sure, I would, but I'm assuming there are reasons why we didn't get that, and what we get is a really, really nice looking version of this film. And what's unique about this film is that it's shot by Vilmos Zsigmond, and he used a very specific post-flashing technique. As I understand it, he wanted to give the film a certain pastel look to make it look like it was actually from 20 years ago, the 1950s, being that it was made in the 70s. And so in production design, they sort of decided they would not have a lot of bright colors in the sets or the costumes. And this post-flashing technique is you film a scene and then you expose it to a certain amount of light based on, in this case, there's a really great feature on here that's not listed. Oh yeah, it is listed. The American Cinematographer article from 1973. It's an interview with Vilmos Zsigmond talking about the post-flashing technique, which I'd always heard about, but never the specifics of it. And that's a great article. I read the article, and I can't necessarily explain it that much better, but I can tell you that he used different amounts of flash, meaning he's exposing the film, he's filming the scene, and then after the scene, it's being exposed to a little bit more light before it's developed. And that does a thing where it softens the picture, and it creates sharper shadow detail. And it depends on how the scene was filmed. Was it a nighttime scene? Was it a daytime scene? What kind of lighting was used? And throughout the article, they talk about, this shot was 15% flash and this shot was 20%. And so it's fascinating stuff. But it gives the film a very specific look. So it's not going to pop in the same way a new scan of even a 70s film might. But that said, this is the best I've ever seen it look. And I think it looks really, really lovely. Okay, so anyway, let's keep going with the disc here. So from the old disc and the DVD, I think you have Rip Van Marlow, the featurette with Robert Altman and Elliot Gould. And then you have Vilmos Zsigmond flashes. And in that featurette, he talks about the flashing technique. Those are both old featurettes, and I'm glad they're back. But there's a lot of new stuff here. I'm going to save the best for last. But let's talk about David Thompson on Robert Altman. That is a 21-minute featurette, and that is the editor of Altman on Altman. That's David Thompson, the book Altman on Altman, which I highly recommend if you're an Altman fan. It's just a great book of interviews, and it's just fantastic stuff. Actually, one of my favorite books on film, partially because I love Altman so much. But anyway, so David Thompson's the editor. He gives a brief career overview, and then he goes into very specific discussions of The Long Goodbye for the majority of the runtime of the featurette. And it's good stuff. I mean, a lot of it I'd heard before, but there's definitely some good nuggets in there that I enjoyed. After that, you have Tom Williams on Raymond Chandler. Tom Williams is the author of a book called A Mysterious Something in the Light, Raymond Chandler, A Life. A very young-looking guy who's written a book on Raymond Chandler and who gives a history briefly of Chandler and his writings prior to The Long Goodbye, and then he talks about the film and the book, and then some of the other film work that Chandler did. And it's a cool little featurette. It's about 14 minutes and 28 seconds. Then we have Maxim Jakubowski on Hard Boiled Fiction featurette, and he is a crime writer, critic, and author. This is about a 14.5-minute featurette, and he's just talking about hard-boiled detective fiction in general. It's a nice survey overview. Obviously, he brings in the Long Goodbye and Philip Marlowe, and it's a cool little discussion. I like that as well. And the American Cinematographer article, which is great. It's just a matter of like I remember old Laserdiscs where you'd have a document, you just click left and it would flip a page. And so that's a really great article from 1973. But the thing I love the most is the new audio commentary from film historian Tim Lucas. I've talked about my affection for his commentaries on the channel before, and so when I see one of my favorite commentators talking about one of my favorite movies, it's a must listen. And I really enjoyed it. A few tidbits I took away from it. I just wrote down a few things from just the beginning, not to spoil too much of the track if you want to listen yourselves, obviously. Morris the cat, famed for his cat food commercials, and is still, I think, sold on cat food containers, is one of the two twin cats that plays Marlowe's cat in this movie. I feel like I'd heard that before, but I love that Tim Lucas trotted that one out. And then another sort of cool factoid is that one of the cops that grabs Marlowe at the beginning of the film, that's at his apartment at the beginning of the film, actor by the name of Jerry Jones, would go on to work with Rudy Ray Moore and write both Dolomite and The Human Tornado, as well as act in those films. So a nice little connection to exploitation and Rudy Ray Moore. But in general, there's a lot of cool comparisons to the source novel. So you have source novel versus the film. You have Lee Brackett's script versus the film. You have script versus film versus what's improvised. He seems to know like certain scenes that are, you can kind of feel which ones you think were improvised, but he's giving some verification to that fact of like this scene with Marlowe in jail where he's got the ink, he puts it under his eyes like a football player and talks about improvising that stuff, and the initial scene with the cops is improvised, things like that. So he's comparing the script to what ended up in the film, be it improvised or not, and then in some cases what was in the source novel, where the source novel starts, for instance, versus where the film starts versus where the script starts. I find that stuff kind of fascinating. Just the idea of what could have been if there was a more faithful adaptation of the source novel, or if Altman and Gould had stuck more directly to the script, things would be a little different. But I do think that the combination of all those things, the fact that they didn't stick directly to the source novel, that they were, very free, as Altman often is, to improvise in character and just create this guy, this "it's okay with me" detective, really makes the film unique and a lasting gem in my mind. Anyway, so again, this would have probably been in my favorites of the year list, even though it's already come out on Blu-ray before. This new edition I find to be much more definitive than the previous Blu-ray, and more so than the Arrow release that's also come out. So I guess this would be the one that you need. If you're a fan of this film, like I said, this new scan looks very good, and I just highly recommend it. So I just wanted to take a moment while I'm putting out all these best of the year, favorites of the year videos, and plop in a few singles in the cases where I didn't have the disc at the time. So anyway, highly recommended. Definitely pick it up. I'll leave a link below. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.